Hi, my name is Joanna Rushton. I'm one of Czech Institute's faculty members here in Australia, and I'm here to talk to you today about how to flatten your abs forever. Certainly something that back in my 20s I was looking to overcome the muffin top and look for the true secrets to creating the aesthetic look that so many men and women today are looking for when it comes to their abdominal structure. So let's go ahead and have a look at what our key learning objectives are for today. Realizing, of course, that exercise is stress and that before mechanical or physical stress can be beneficial to the organism, we first got to ensure that all support systems of the body are operating with the zone of homeostasis, or what we know is to be balanced. Understanding that the relationship between diet, health and abdominal wall and the aesthetic looks of the abdominals are very important. And of course, recognizing the intimate relationship between internal organisms and the musculoskeletal system, understanding that they hold hands. Is it really all about exercise? I wish. If it was as simple as just exercising, women would all have flat tummies, and of course the men would have washboard abs and six packs. So what does the bigger picture really look like? Well, it doesn't take a second longer to do an effective exercise than it does to do an ineffective exercise. Is your closet full of those TV gimmicks, the ones that you've never really used or used once and thrown away? If you factor in the cost of medical expenses per person per year, decreased vitality and quality of lost time to doctor's visits and surgical procedures, then you come to understand that organic food, good stress management and correct exercise become real money and time savers. So there are 8 secrets to flattening your abs forever. Let's take a closer look. You can't exercise your way out of a poor diet or poor lifestyle choices. What we eat affects how we look, how we think, how we feel, and how rapidly we age. When it comes to building health from the inside out, we have 6 foundation principles that govern the overall global health of the body. We have our thoughts and our attitude, which govern our moment-to-moment thoughts. Then, of course, we have our breathing, which every other system of the body is subordinate to. Then, of course, we have hydration, our 3rd foundation principle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Nutrition, exercise, and then, of course, the importance of sleep and rest. These foundation principles are interrelatable, and they're also modifiable. And of course, therefore, they determine the aesthetics of your abdominals. Most people are living the 80-20 rule back to front. They spend 20% of their time trying to make up for 80% of their unhealthy choices, realizing it just really doesn't work. The first concept we're going to take a look at is Paul's primal pattern diet type. The first concept we're going to take a look at is Paul's primal pattern diet type. This approach to eating is based on the understanding that each have our own biochemical individuality and therefore your own unique biochemical needs that we derive through foods. You're as unique on the inside as you are on the outside, which is why one man's food becomes another man's poison. Dr. Roger Williams, PhD, an author, shows this brilliantly in his book, Biochemical Individuality. We'll look into that a little bit more later. Mother Nature created foods which we group into what we call macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Different bodies require different ratios of these macronutrients for the optimal conversion of energy. Just like you need the right amount of paper and kindling to start a fire, or the right amount of petrol and oxygen to start a car, well, the same is true for your engine. When you get the right ratio of macronutrients is consumed relative to your individual needs, then you create homeostasis or balance throughout the body's systems, and we achieve optimal conversion of food into energy. It's like having the right fuel mix for a car engine or the right ratio of ingredients for a cake. If you get it wrong, the cake doesn't taste good, And of course, that ride in the car doesn't feel so good. And the same is true for our bodies. The right fuel mix, i.e. the right quality of macronutrients in the right ratio relative to your needs, the more optimal, healthier and happier the body is, and the more enjoyable it's going to be within the skin you're in. Our changing environments influence our changing needs within the ratio of macronutrients we consume. Things like the seasons, the changing in the temperature, is going to dictate our ratio between our needs of proteins and fats versus carbohydrates. Even monthly cycles. For women, for example, their periods impact the changing needs for iron, which is lost during the menstruation cycle. If we're listening to our bodies, we can be in tune to that, and we might naturally realize that we're craving more iron to replace that loss during the period. How much exercise we have and what type of exercise we're doing changes our needs. How much mental and emotional stress we're under also changes our needs. Cholesterol is, of course, the precursor to the production of both our body's stress hormones, cortisol, as well as our growth, repair, and reproductive hormones. But of course, our body's need for cortisol to manage stress will always trump the body's needs for growth, repair, and reproductive hormones. In other words, the more stressed you are, the more you are suppressing the body's ability to produce your growth, repair, and reproductive hormones, because the body will prioritize the survival hormone cortisol for the very primary reason of survival over that of growth, repair, and fertility. Dr. Daniel Siegel defines the mind as an embodied process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Real food delivers both energy and information to the body. But if you're not able to listen to your body-mind's needs because you're caught up in following ideas of what constitutes as healthy or what you think is a healthy choice, which means that you could be overlooking your own biochemical needs by perhaps following a vegan or vegetarian diet, then it's possible that your body actually isn't getting all that it needs to thrive. Developed from William Walcott's book, Metabolic Typing, we can categorize our individual needs that are influenced through our genetic and geographical backgrounds into three basic groups. The first is the polar type, from colder climates closer to the north or south of the pole. Here we look at foods derived from 70% fats and 30% carbohydrates. Paul describes anything with eyes as being an easy way to remember what contains fats and proteins. And of course, no eyes being our carbohydrates. Then you have your equatorial types from warmer climates that would be consuming more carbohydrates. Here you see a ratio of 40% eyes and 60% no eyes. Then you have your variable types that do well on a ratio of about 50-50. In his book, Dr. Weston A. Price shows how when you eat in accordance to your racial ethnic background, then you meet your biochemical needs. Let's take, for example, the Eskimos that thrive off up to 90% fats, oils, and proteins. And this is because you can't grow vegetables in ice. It's just too cold. So they've found that they've adapted genetically over generations so that they do well on consuming high amounts of proteins and fats. On the opposite end, you've got the Indians of South America, which live off largely a vegetable plant-based diet. If you took a look at the native Aboriginals, if they're coastal, they tend to have a higher fat and protein diet. If they're inland, they tend to have a higher carbohydrate diet. And then you have groups such as the Celtic Irish that have a higher than normal consumption of fish oil. And this is required because both the Irish and the Aboriginals are more susceptible to alcohol dependency due to a lack of genetic protective factors such as metabolizing enzymes and variants. However, what the research shows is that an increase in their omega-3 consumption significantly reduces their craving and their dependency, pointing once again that the fact that we all have our own biochemical individuality. In his book, Biochemical Individuality, Roger Williams shares with us that even within the same family, there can be a variance of individual blood plasma level for potassium that might vary between 200 to 300%. With calcium, he's found that variances can be up to 5-fold or 500% variance. And that the common taste variances can again change by 100%. And that even some children could not taste sugar in a 20% solution. The thing we have to remember here is that blood tests offer such a narrow markers for what is deemed as the normal range that it's no surprise that the majority of the population fall outside the normal range and end up being either prescribed supplements or drugs. Paul's tachyometer, which holistic lifestyle practitioners use as a tool to coach their clients to listen and feel to what their body responses are, is a wonderful way to start to identify what your unique needs are. If we had a look at the slide and the tachyometer, what you can start to see if you looked at the symptoms in red on the right-hand side of too much carbohydrate, as an example, relative to the amount of fat and protein that you have. These are some common symptoms that the body can start displaying anywhere up to 20 minutes to an hour after a meal. So headaches, anxiety, you perhaps don't feel satisfied, or you get hungry quickly after a meal. This is because you are ultimately eating too much carbohydrate relative to your needs for fat and protein, which starts to deregulate your blood sugar levels, start to create energy crashes and metabolic chaos within the body. But if you followed the tachyometer diagram and followed anything from the selection of options in the arrow that goes, the blue arrow that goes to the left, then you can start to see how any one of those selections is designed to start to balance out the biochemistry of the body. And by introducing some more fat and protein, it starts to biochemically balance the overconsumption of carbohydrates that we've consumed. The same is true as if you go down to the bottom, where the symptoms are from consuming too much fat and protein relative to your needs for carbohydrates. And again, if you followed that blue arrow, it's giving you suggestions of what you can do to balance out that biochemistry, to bring more carbohydrate back in to balance what the body needs. The way I sometimes think of the engine of a body is to consider that if you have a burning fire, and if it's burning optimally, then you've got consistent amount of energy over a long period of time. And that's what we're looking for. You know, we shouldn't be grazing and eating throughout the entire day. Ultimately, we should be able to go from meal to meal for about 4 to 5 hours in between a meal. So there are some key markers that we're looking for, and if you look at the diagram that shows you with being in the power zone, then it shows you some of the key feedback mechanisms that we should be feeling in accordance to the right balance of macronutrients when we actually get it right. And when we don't, we can feel tired or sluggish, or we can feel anxious and revved up. An easy way of starting to tune in to your own biochemical metabolic needs is, you know, think of it this way. If you have a fire burning and you went and put petrol onto that fire, what happens? Well, that fire goes up, it starts roaring, lots of energy, but very quickly it will die out. And that's very similar to putting too many sugars, too many simple carbohydrates into your system relative to proteins and fats. You're going to get a surge of energy, but soon after you're going to be tired and looking for another stimulant again. If we reversed it and went the other way, and you have that burning fire optimally burning, but you came up to it and you put a bucket of sand on that fire, then that fire literally goes out. And that's what can happen when you put too many fats and protein into the system relative to the carbohydrates that you need. It literally is like putting the fire out, and after that meal you can feel tired and sluggish and literally be wanting to take a nap. So there are just a couple of examples of how the wrong balance of macronutrients, protein, fats and carbohydrates in the wrong system creates the effects that create energy crises and metabolic chaos within the system. How often have you found yourself feeling tired and fat? Complaining perhaps to your doctor that no matter how much regular exercise you get, you can't seem to get rid of the stubborn fat. As practitioners, we hear this all the time, and there are two main reasons in combination for this. Number one is an overly toxic body that is holding on to fat as a protective measure for the organs and the glands. We have to remember that fat is where the body stores the excess toxins, that when the liver is overburdened, it doesn't have the energy to neutralize and process these toxins out of the body. And if you combine this with overtraining, which tends to happen when people are trying to lose weight, this leads to hormonal imbalances which will promote weight gain rather than support weight loss or the maintenance of a healthy body weight. As I said before, you can't exercise yourself out of a poor diet. Many people use their workouts, unfortunately, as an excuse to eat their favorite junk food, which is laden with empty processed simple carbohydrates, delivering no nutrients to the body whatsoever. As a result, our blood sugar levels become deregulated. We start suffering from energy crashes that lead to a dependency on other stimulants like coffee and energy drinks. We have to understand that our cells are regenerated from the quality of the raw material that we choose to eat. The value of energy and information from carbohydrates made from processed grain is inferior in comparison to the energy and information derived from organic fruits and vegetables and salads and biocompatible for the body. In other words, the body recognizes these natural, unprocessed, nutrient-rich foods versus the displaced foods made from processed foods containing all sorts of non-compatible substances such as preservatives, additives, stabilizers, emulsifiers, colorings, flavorings, pesticides, and other chemical residues. Proteins too can become problematic when they're consumed in a processed manner or in excess. With well-sourced organic meat, the way Mother Nature intended it for us, we have all the vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, fats, enzymes needed for digestion and assimilation of the protein. It's an excellent protein with heat, stable fats that don't oxidize and turn rancid. The body can also make use of the triglycerides, breaking them down into usable sources of energy. Whey is a byproduct of the dairy industry. Processed proteins such as whey protein powders and whey protein isolates are very unstable, and they need to be protected by chemical stabilizers when they're transported. They are devoid of the biologically active fats along with vitamins A and the enzymes to assimilate the protein itself. Physicians like Francis Possinger that investigated the impact of nutrition on genetic material of the organism found that the more processed and denatured a food is, such as pasteurized whey, the more damage it does to the overall organism. His research, called Pottinger Cats, is a perfect demonstration for the effects of processed denatured foods on our genes and even at a DNA level. So the bottom line is whey protein powder sells for about 18 cents a kilo. The tub probably costs more than what is actually in it. It costs no more than about $3 to $5 to produce that whey protein versus the actual cost of what the margins are for a good quality piece of steak. You seriously have to question the value and the quality of all the protein being marketed to us from the supplement companies. So what does a post-workout meal look like? Well, first of all, eating soon after your meal is optimal. Always eat in accordance to your primal pattern type. Immediately after training is the only time that elevated insulin levels are beneficial. So this is a great way of replenishing the blood glucose levels back into the muscles. This is a big one. We really have to start to think before we drink. Most drinks sold in gyms are full of sugar and laced with caffeine and other metabolic stimulants that affect the hormonal system and hormonal balance. They increase our circulating blood sugar levels, increasing the need for insulin production, putting more stress on the sympathetic nervous system. Of course, this is ending in metabolic chaos that leads to suppressed immune systems and an overstimulated nervous system. Remember, the sugar contents dehydrates the body, which further depletes our body of vital minerals as it needs those minerals to process the sugar. Plain and simple, water is the best. And of course, as they say, the solution to pollution is dilution. Today, we really have to drink right to think right. The fast food nation and international bestseller lifts the veil of deception on what really is behind the flavoring, colorings and additives used in the fast food industry today and in the consumption of so many drinks. This is an example of the ingredients that goes into making a typical artificial strawberry flavor in a Burger King strawberry milkshake. I don't know about you, but I need to take out a degree in chemistry to know even how to pronounce these chemicals, let alone what effect they have on the body. On the label itself, it just has the strawberry flavoring, not the actual ingredients that makes up the strawberry flavoring. What's written on the label and what's actually in the product is often the rest of the story that's not told. When the digestive system is constantly exposed to non-foods and other non-biocompatible substances, such as additives, preservatives, colorings, flavorings, emulsifiers, stabilizers, GMO foods, pesticides, DDT, glyphosate, artificial sweeteners. The autoimmune system mounts its defense on behalf of your body, and the result is chronic elevated cortisol levels and an inflammatory war zone, causing abdominal distension, bloating, fluid retention, excess gas, constipation and diarrhea. In this environment, the body can't produce a favorable response to exercise. And so no matter how much exercise you do or how many abdominal crunches you do, you'll never be achieving the desired results you're after. When the ratio of cortisol and DHEA are deregulated, the increased circulating cortisol has far-reaching effects on all systems of the body. The neurological health is just one example, impacting cognitive function, memory loss, stunting learning and development. But what about the effects of the musculoskeletal system? When an excess of cortisol increases inflammation, causing a catabolic effect on muscle tissue, it starts to slow down growth and repair, healing and recovery, resulting in unstable joints and increasing the likelihood of injury.